DHS and CISA hemorrhaging cyber talent, agencies from across the federal government are terminating good performing cyber talent, including at the Department of Education, the General Service Administration, and the Veterans Affairs. Many of these civil servants were fired with a day's notice, no service, and no good reason. Under these circumstances, who would choose to participate in this kind of scholarship for service program? I cannot ask people to make a 2-year commitment to government service when the federal government is under a hiring freeze and when a participant would be arbitrarily fired by a 19-year-old Musk protege. Even if we were to enact this bill, there's no guarantee CISA would implement it. The administration is currently refusing to implement existing pipeline programs, including the Intelligence and Cybersecurity Diversity Fellowship at DHS. Why would we create new scholarships when the administration will not even carry out existing ones? Additionally, this bill asks CISA to take on the significant undertaking of implementing this new, potentially expensive program. Who at CISA is going to run this program and with what money? In the last couple of weeks, scores of CISA employees have been laid off or placed on administrative leave. We don't know the total number. We don't know all the roles that have been cut. We don't know when the layoffs will stop. But we do know these cuts will harm CISA's ability to carry out its responsibilities. We in Congress are very good at writing down our ideas. Sometimes we can even get those ideas enacted into law. But let me remind my Republican colleagues, it's the dedicated civil servants under attack today who turn our ideals into actual programs. If they are gone, bills like this one are just words on a page. When Secretary Noem promising a smaller CISA with layoffs ongoing, I do not see how CISA can implement this program while maintaining their existing services. Considering the chairman voted to cut CISA's budget by 25%, it does not appear that Republicans are interested in providing CISA with the necessary funding either. And the House just passed a budget resolution that will ultimately eviscerate state budgets. So it's not clear to me how any state government will come up with the money to hire any Pivot Act participant. There will come a time when we need to undo the damage of the Trump-Musk administration is currently inflicting on the federal cyber workforce. Perhaps a program like this will be part of that solution, though much more likely will be needed in that trust between the federal government and its employees is severely broken. But today, our focus must be on stopping the bleeding, not passing an unfunded mandate on CISA that may very well be nothing but a false promise to potential students. If my Republican colleagues are so concerned about the cyber workforce, they should speak out against the current attack on existing workers and against cuts. For these reasons, I oppose the Cyber Pivot Act and encourage my colleagues to vote no. And I yield back.
Mr. Jimenez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of Chairman Green's H.R. 1000, the Cyber Pivot Act. At a time when cyber attacks from nation-state actors are growing in both frequency and severity, we cannot neglect the importance of securing cyberspace and enhancing our cyber workforce. As this committee knows, our country currently faces a shortage of nearly 500,000 skilled cyber professionals. We must not continue to be outnumbered by our adversaries in such a critical domain. The shortage of skilled cyber professionals is felt in every city, county, and state across America. We know that critical infrastructure in the United States is currently compromised by communist Chinese components. We must ensure we have enough cyber professionals to curb the increasing threats to our infrastructure and networks. Passing the Cyber Pivot Act is a good step forward in closing the national cyber workforce gap. This piece of legislation will provide new opportunities.
Pull them to their grave! go! Modern geniuses think twice. Rule breakers second guess. And visionaries see things differently. But here, the greatest chefs on earth risk everything at the spin of a wheel. This is the world's ultimate culinary competition where 32 of the best chefs ever face off, but only one can be champion. It's time to put it all on the plate.
Season premiere, Tournament of Champions, Sunday night at 8. See it first on Food Network. Stream next day on Max.
Glad that we are reconsidering this legislation. I encourage all members of the committee to support.
And welcome back to Live Now from Fox. If you are just joining us, we have been on Capitol Hill as we've been listening into this hearing related to Doge-related security lapses, as well as federal hiring freezes. And I do want to head back to that live discussion right now.
Critical that we provide these industries and these folks with the resources to be able to contend with these cyber attacks and the cyber threats that we're facing. Because as they've told me, if we don't do that, it's a matter of when, not if, they fall victim. The Cyber Pivot Act addresses this by establishing a strong scholarship program for 2-year cybersecurity focused degrees in exchange for service at the federal or state or local or territorial or tribal level. Internship opportunities in the program strengthen real-world skills for students so they're ready to serve our cybersecurity needs on day one. Knowing that everyone here agrees that cyber threats significantly endanger national security and that we lack the adequate workforce at all levels of government to counter those threats, I urge bipartisan support for this common sense legislation to provide dependable and sustainable career pathways for all Americans and to protect our nation from foreign adversaries, and yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Ms. Turner, you're recognized.
And Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, I looked at this bill and I will tell you, generally, I can be supported. I met with some college students 2 days ago in my office. And it is important that we not create false hopes or false promises. On the scholarship for service programs, I was seeing that under now rescinded. So this is a scholarship program that currently exists, which I support. And you have students who are in these areas, but the jobs they have is no more. It's been rescinded. You have the Cybersecurity Diversity Fellowship Program, That's been stopped. You have the cyber talent management system. That's been stopped. The Presidential Management Fellowship Program. That's been stopped. All of these are like scholarship programs with all of the intended purposes that we are discussing today. But they're being eliminated and stopped. And then you have 130 CC employees who were laid off. So I agree that there's a tremendous need for cybersecurity to build up the workforce. But currently we're moving in the wrong direction. I think the worst thing we could do to this next generation and to those in community college would be to say one thing and do another. That's the worst thing we could do. Then they lose faith in who we are, in the government that we say we're here to protect them and their future. That's what bothers me. And then for 1/3 of the students in community colleges, they rely on Pell Grants. 1/3 of them. But last night, we took steps to take over $300 million out of the Pell Grant program. That will adversely affect students in community colleges. So my major objection, and the reason that I can't do it, though I recognize that we're 500,000 short, I agree with that, and that we need the workforce, is that we can't do one thing, say one thing and do another. That would be the worst betrayal to our students and to the next generation. And we have scholarship programs already in existence, but we're not following through with them. I think that's double talk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. Recognize Mr. Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank you for your dedication and commitment on this particular piece of legislation. You have been a champion for seeking to secure our cyber border, to protect our communities against cyber threats. I am a proud co-sponsor of this legislation. I do proudly support what I believe is a common sense approach to dealing with the shortage that we are facing now. And so I would, again, want to thank you for your leadership, and I would like to yield the remainder of my time to you so that you can highlight the wins in this particular piece of legislation for the American people. So with that, I yield the remainder of my time to you.
I thank the gentleman, and I'd like to enter this article from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The headline of the business section, Starbucks to cut its office staff. How often do we see companies all across the country doing layoffs because they get themselves in a particular difficult situation and need to do so? It happens all the time. Workers across America have to deal with this all the time. But yet, if you listen to the ranking member, you'd think that federal employees are immune somehow. Look, the federal government is bloated. We are spending far too much money. And there have been so many false statements made by members of Congress, by the press about what's happening at this Doge thing, that it's almost, people are laughing at it now. From CISA, 130 people, 3% of the workforce. It's not like CISA has been handicapped. All across our government, there is a deep dive going on to figure out how we can cut spending because we are broke, 37 trillion in debt. This is a bloated government, and it's time for some layoffs. And the federal employees are doing a great job. They're going to get to keep their job. This idea that because you have a federal job, you're immune to any of the stuff that the rest of Americans have to deal with every day is a falsehood. And it's time we get the spending and the bloatedness in this federal bureaucracy taken care of, and thank God for somebody willing to do it. It has nothing to do with this scholarship program. The scholarship programs that are on pause are on pause. They're not ended. It is a misstatement to suggest otherwise. This is political games. This is somebody clawing for a piece because they got their ass handed to them. All the swing states, they lost overwhelmingly. Every single state saw more Republican votes than ever before. This guy's doing what he said when he got a mandate at the polls, and here he goes. And all they got is to cry constitutional crisis, all this other stuff, much of which is false. The security clearance that was mentioned many times when we were in our last hearing, well, guess what? He's got a top secret security clearance. We're going to continue to hear more of it. It's all they got. The federal government is bloated, and it's time to downsize. And the poor people at Starbucks are going through the same thing every single American has to go through. And now the federal employment, the federal workforce knows they're not immune any longer. As for this Cyber Pivot Act, this is an opportunity to create a pipeline. We're 500,000 empty cyber jobs in America right now. This is our number one priority. Witness after witness has come before this committee and said, we gotta have a bigger pipeline. Bernoulli's equation, how do you create increased flow through a pipeline? You increase the diameter of the pipeline. That's what this bill's gonna do. And you can vote yes last year and no this year, but your people are gonna remember that. And I certainly will. With that, I yield back to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest.
At that point, I have no further comments. Again, thank you for your leadership on this issue. Now yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anybody else wish to? We'll go to Mr. Higgins and then anyone else. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note the moment. Like there's no righteous cause behind supporting legislation in the 118th Congress and opposing it in the 119th Congress. There's a genuine question. Americans will ask, well, what happened? Have your core principles changed? Has what drives your vote, your core principles or not? So if it's from the change of the loss of an election, from your perspective, then I just think we should note the moment. And I fully support the bill. My signature is on the bill. And I appreciate the chairman driving this legislation. We need this workforce development. I mean, there's no debate about that. We certainly do. And this is the type of legislation that normally would carry bipartisan support. So it's not necessarily, it's not going to obstruct us. We're going to save the country whether anybody likes it or not. We're going to do what we have to do. But it's noteworthy, like the absence of support for a bill that carried broad bipartisan support in the last Congress is quite notable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? Mr. McKenzie, you're recognized.
Excuse me. Let's stand up.
Mr. Thanador, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I yield to the ranking member, my time.
You recognize?
Yeah, gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much. Well, this notion is that this country operates as a stagnant country. Things change. When we voted on the Pivot Act last year, we were looking at creating opportunities. This year, all of a sudden, we've taken a chainsaw and we have assaulted federal employees. The chair just said, and I thought was an unusual term as how he referred to this government, but that was his speech. But the notion is that all of us have heard from federal employees saying how they received emails telling them in no uncertain term that they were expendable. Then they received other emails telling them, give me 5 things that you've done last week Then in short order, they are told, no, disregard it. But that's not how we do it. And when we now say all of a sudden that we want to hire people, and we started pushing people out the door, a righteous cause is one that's based on the facts. The facts say since this administration has taken office, there's been a slash and burn approach to the personnel who work for the government. Many of them who put their lives, including the chairman here, on the line to defend it. But we have a lot of veterans, a lot of them who've come to our office this week, who are members of the DAV, who work for one of our agencies. And now all of a sudden, we're saying you're expendable. And so I'm opposed to the legislation because things have changed. When you look at the facts, it is clear that this administration, in its approach to addressing whatever the personnel challenges are disregarding and making us more vulnerable. All of the people who are working in those sensitive areas have not been vetted. So it's clear from my vantage point that this legislation can't be addressed because the jobs don't exist.
And we're listening into this House hearing as they're speaking on Doge and related security lapses, as well as federal hiring freezes. We're going to come back to that on the other side of this 2-minute break. But also when we come back, we do have some more news to take you out to as the FAA now speaking out on the latest air incident. That's next.